A single drop of crimson wine, a Merlot from a private Napa vineyard worth more than her monthly rent, was all it took to shatter Catherine Pierce's world. It wasn't just a stain on a pristine white dress. It was a brand, a mark of her station, a scarlet letter painted by the condescending sneer of a woman who believed the world was her playground. That night, under the golden chandeliers of the city's most exclusive restaurant, she was just a waitress, an invisible girl. But in the shadows, a different kind of power was watching a man who didn't see a stain, but the quiet, unbreakable dignity beneath it. This is the story of how one moment of humiliation became the catalyst for an unbelievable transformation, proving that sometimes the person you dismiss is the one who will end up owning the room you're in. The Air in Aurelia, the city's most celebrated fine dining establishment, was a carefully curated symphony of quiet sophistication. It smelled of truffle oil, old money, and the faint, crisp scent of starched linen. For Catherine Kate Pierce, it smelled of survival. Each night she navigated the labyrinth of tables, her black uniform a stark contrast to the jewel-toned silks and bespoke suits of the clientele. She moved with a practiced grace, her smile a polite, impenetrable mask that hid the exhaustion of a 12-hour shift and the lingering anxiety over her father's mounting medical bills. Tonight, Table 7 was the epicenter of the restaurant's universe. It was occupied by Bradley Vance, a brash real estate developer whose face was plastered on billboards across the city, and his girlfriend, Tiffany Sterling. Tiffany was a creature sculpted from ambition and adorned in designer labels. Tonight she wore a dress the color of fresh cream, a figure-hugging sheath of silk that probably cost more than Kate's entire art history degree. Her blonde hair was a perfect, immovable helmet, and her laughter was a high, sharp sound that sliced through the restaurant's hushed ambiance. Kate approached their table with a bottle of the 2012 Rutherford Cabernet Sauvignon, her movements fluid and economical. "Mr. Vance, your Cabernet," she murmured, her voice soft but clear. Tiffany waved a dismissive hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light and splintering it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. "Just pour it, darling. We don't need the life story of the grape." Kate's smile didn't falter. She was used to this. The casual condescension was as much a part of the uniform as the apron tied around her waist. She positioned the bottle her hand steady and began to pour the deep red liquid into Bradley's glass. It happened in a blink. A waiter carrying a heavy tray of desserts swerved to avoid a boisterous guest from another table. His elbow jostled Kate's arm just as she tilted the bottle. It was a minuscule nudge, a fractional error in the grand cosmic ballet, but its consequence was catastrophic. A single perfect stream of crimson wine arced through the air, landing directly on the pristine cream silk of Tiffany Sterling's dress. For a moment, there was absolute silence. The dark red stain bloomed on the fabric like a grotesque flower just below her ribs. Tiffany looked down. Her perfectly painted lips parted in a silent gasp of horror. Then her eyes, the color of a winter sky, lifted to meet Kate's. The polite chill in them had frozen into daggers of pure ice. "You clumsy, incompetent little fool." She hissed, her voice low and venomous, yet it seemed to carry across the entire dining room. The surrounding tables fell quiet, conversations dying as patrons turned to watch the unfolding drama. "I am so incredibly sorry," Kate began, her face flushing with heat. "It was an accident." "The other... an accident." Tiffany's voice rose a shrill theatrical crescendo. "This is a custom Brandon Maxwell dress. It's ruined. Do you have any idea what this costs? Of course you don't. It's probably more than you make in a year." Bradley Vance shifted uncomfortably, a dull flush creeping up his neck. "Tiff, calm down. It's just a dress. Just a dress? She shrieked, turning on him. It's not just a dress, when it's your credit card paying for it, is it, Brad? Or perhaps you think I should just wear rags like her. She gestured a perfectly manicured finger at Kate, disgust twisting her beautiful features. Kate stood frozen, the heavy wine bottle still in her hand. Her training dictated that she should apologize profusely, offer to pay for the cleaning, and debase herself until the customer was satisfied. But the sheer venom in Tiffany's tone paralyzed her. It wasn't about the dress. It was about power. It was about Tiffany reinforcing the chasm that separated their two worlds. I can get you some club soda, Kate stammered, her professional composure cracking. Tiffany laughed, a sound devoid of all humor. Club soda. You think a splash of fizzy water is going to fix this? You should be fired. What's your name? She squinted at Kate's name tag. Catherine, how pathetically plain. I'm going to speak to your manager. I will make sure you're not waiting tables here or anywhere else in this city by tomorrow. The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. For Kate, losing this job wasn't an inconvenience, it was a catastrophe. It was the difference between paying for her father's medication and not. It was the barrier standing between her and utter financial ruin. Panic began to claw at her throat, cold and sharp. She looked around the room, her eyes pleading. She saw a sea of averted gazes of diners, suddenly fascinated by their bread baskets or the pattern on the ceiling. No one would intervene. In this world, the woman in the $1,000 dress held all the cards. The girl in the black apron was disposable. The restaurant manager, a perpetually stressed man named Mr. Dubois, hurried over, his face pale. Ms. Sterling, is there a problem? A problem? Tiffany scoffed. Your waitress just destroyed my dress and stood there like a moron. I want her gone. Now. Mr. Dubois looked at Kate, his expression a mixture of pity and professional necessity. He knew Kate was his best waitress, reliable, hardworking, never causing trouble. But he also knew that Bradley Vance's corporate account spent tens of thousands of dollars at Aurelia every month. The math was simple and brutal. Pierce, go to the back, he said, his voice tight. Humiliation washed over Kate in a searing wave. She placed the wine bottle on the table with a hand that trembled slightly and turned her back straight, her head held high. She could feel every eye in the restaurant on her as she walked the long, lonely path back to the kitchens. The mask was gone. All she felt was the sting of injustice and the cold dread of what was to come. As she pushed through the swinging doors into the cacophony of the kitchen, she didn't see the man sitting alone at a small, discreet table in the corner of the dining room. He had been watching the entire exchange, his face impassive. He took a slow sip of his water, his dark eyes missing nothing. Not the deliberate cruelty in Tiffany Sterling's voice, not the flicker of panic in Kate's eyes, and most certainly not the quiet, steely dignity with which she had absorbed the abuse without shedding a single tear. His name was Damian Blackwood, and unlike Bradley Vance, he didn't measure a person's worth by the label on their clothes. He measured it by their character. And Catherine Pierce had just shown more character than anyone he had seen in a very long time. Damian Blackwood preferred the corner table. It was tucked away behind a large potted ficus, offering a clear view of the dining room while rendering him almost invisible. He came to Aurelia not for the Michelin stars or the C&B scene crowd, but for the anonymity. Dressed in a simple dark sweater and grey trousers without his usual tailored suit and statement watch, he was just another patron easily overlooked. To the world, he was the enigmatic CEO of Blackwood Industries, a global conglomerate with interests in technology, shipping, and finance. He was a billionaire, a titan of industry whose decisions could shift markets. But here he was, just Mr. Black, a quiet man who enjoyed the seared scallops and the solitude. He had been nursing a glass of scotch when the commotion at table 7 began. He'd noticed the couple when they walked in, Vance preening, and Loud a man who wore his wealth like a costume, and the woman Tiffany, who radiated a brittle, demanding energy. Damien had encountered their type 1,000 times in boardrooms and at charity galas. They were empty vessels making the most noise to disguise the hollowness within. He had also noticed the waitress, Kate. He'd been a regular for 6 months, always requesting a table in her section if she was working. He appreciated her quiet efficiency, the way she anticipated a need before it was voiced, the subtle intelligence in her eyes that suggested she was seeing far more than just her customers' orders. There was a grace to her that had nothing to do with her uniform and everything to do with her composure. When the wine spilled, Damien had tensed. He saw the accident for what it was, a fluke, a moment of bad luck. But he also saw the immediate predatory gleam in Tiffany Sterling's eyes. She hadn't seen a mistake. She'd seen an opportunity. An opportunity to exert power to humiliate someone she deemed beneath her, to create a spectacle with herself at the center. He watched his jaw tight with anger as Tiffany unleashed her tirade. He heard every poisonous word, saw the way she weaponized her privilege against a young woman who was simply trying to do her job. He noted Bradley Vance's weak, ineffectual attempt to calm her, a man clearly more afraid of his girlfriend's temper than he was of behaving with basic decency. Damien's contempt for them solidified into a cold, hard stone in his gut. But it was Kate's reaction that truly held his attention. He saw the initial shock, the flush of embarrassment, the flicker of fear when her job was threatened. Any other person might have broken down, groveled, or argued. Kate did none of those things. She absorbed the blows, and though her composure trembled, it did not shatter. When she walked away, her spine was rigid, her head held high. It was a retreat, but it was not a surrender. It was the walk of someone who, despite the circumstances, refused to be broken. Damien signaled for his check. His quiet evening was over. As he paid, he discreetly asked the hostess about the waitress who had served table 7. "Oh, Kate," the young woman said, her voice full of sympathy. "That was awful what happened. Miss Sterling is demanding Mr. Dubois fire her. It's so unfair." "I agree," Damien said, his voice a low rumble. He left a tip that was more than double the cost of his meal and walked out into the cool night air. But he didn't go home. He waited, standing in the shadows of an alcove across the street, his gaze fixed on the restaurant's service entrance. An hour later, the door creaked open. Kate emerged, stripped of her uniform, now wearing jeans and a simple grey hoodie. Her shoulders were slumped, the defiant posture from the dining room, gone replaced by the heavy weight of defeat. She clutched her worn backpack to her chest like a shield. She sat on the edge of a concrete planter, pulled out her phone, and Damien could just make out the faint, trembling light on her face as she scrolled through it, her expression a mask of despair. He crossed the street, his footsteps soft on the pavement. Miss Pierce-Kate's head snapped up, her eyes wide with alarm. She didn't recognize him out of the context of the restaurant. Yes, my name is Damien. I was a patron in the restaurant tonight. I saw what happened." Her face fell, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over her. "Oh." She looked away, focusing on a crack in the sidewalk. "Well, thanks for the reminder." "I'm not here to remind you," he said, gently stopping a respectful few feet away. "I'm here to say that what that woman did was abhorrent, and the way you handled yourself was admirable." Kate looked up at him again, a flicker of surprise in her tired eyes. She had expected pity, or perhaps morbid curiosity. She hadn't expected respect. "Admirable, I got fired." The words came out with a bitter finality. "You were fired because your manager is a coward who values a large bill over a good employee." Damien stated his tone, leaving no room for argument. "That is a reflection on him, not on you." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "I appreciate you saying that, but kind words don't pay the rent." She sighed, running a hand through her simple brown ponytail. I don't know what I'm going to do. My father, he's sick. I need this job. I need the insurance." She hadn't meant to say so much, to unload her burdens onto a complete stranger, but his quiet, steady presence seemed to draw the truth from her. Damien's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "What do you want to do, Catherine? If you weren't a waitress at Aurelia, what would you be doing?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. The dream was something she kept locked away, a fragile treasure she only looked at in the quietest hours of the night. "It's silly," she mumbled. "Try me," he urged. She took a breath. "I have a degree in art history. My focus was on the Dutch masters, specifically the provenance of works looted during World War II. I wanted to be a curator, or work in art repatriation, helping families and institutions recover stolen pieces." She said it all in a rush, as if saying it quickly would make it sound less ridiculous, coming from a fired waitress sitting on a dirty planter. Damien remained silent for a long moment, studying her. The passion that had lit up her face when she spoke of her dream was a stark contrast to the weary resignation of moments before. This was the real Catherine Pierce. "That's not silly," he said, finally, his voice firm. "That's important." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. It was made of thick, black cardstock, with a name embossed in silver, Damien Blackwood. Below it was a single title, Chairman, the Blackwood Foundation. "I am the head of a private foundation," he said, his words measured and deliberate. "Among other things, we fund a significant arts and antiquities department. We specialize in provenance research and repatriation. It's a personal interest of mine." Kate stared at the card, her mind struggling to process the information. The Blackwood Foundation. It was one of the most prestigious philanthropic organizations in the world. Its arts department was legendary, responsible for recovering several lost masterpieces in recent years. I don't understand." She whispered, her gaze lifting from the card to his face. For the first time, she truly looked at him, and a jolt of recognition went through her. She'd seen this man's face before in the financial pages of newspapers and magazines. Damien Blackwood, the billionaire. He had been sitting in her section, and she had never even noticed. "I believe Damien said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips, that you may be in the wrong profession, Catherine. My foundation has an opening for a junior research associate. It's a demanding role. It requires intelligence, meticulous attention to detail, and a quiet strength of character. I think you might be perfect for it." He paused. "My assistant will call you tomorrow to arrange an interview. If you're interested." Kate could only stare, the black card feeling impossibly heavy in her hand. The world had tilted on its axis. One moment she was at rock bottom, humiliated and jobless. The next she was being offered a lifeline, a chance at the very dream she thought she had been forced to abandon forever. And it was all happening because of a spilled glass of wine. The next morning, Kate woke to the insistent buzzing of her phone. Her first thought was that it was Mr. Dubois calling to demand she return her uniform or to deliver some final parting insult. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she fumbled for the device on her nightstand. The number was unfamiliar with a downtown exchange she didn't recognize. Hesitantly, she answered. "Hello, good morning. Am I speaking with Catherine Pierce?" The voice on the other end was female, crisp, and impossibly professional. "Yes, this is she. My name is Genevieve Croft. I am the executive assistant to Mr. Damien Blackwood at the Blackwood Foundation. Mr. Blackwood asked me to contact you regarding an opening in our Arts and Antiquities department. He was hoping you might be available to come in for an interview this afternoon at 2 o'clock. The words were spoken with such calm certainty that Kate felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. It hadn't been a dream. The man in the dark sweater, the business card, the impossible offer, it was all real. Today. At 2, she repeated her voice, a weak echo. "Is that inconvenient?" Genevieve asked, a hint of programmed politeness in her tone. "No, not at all." "It's perfect," Kate rushed to say, sitting bolt upright in bed. 2 o'clock is perfect. Excellent. The address is 1400 Park Avenue, 50th floor. Please ask for me upon your arrival." The line clicked dead. Kate stared at the phone, her mind racing. 1400 Park Avenue, the Blackwood Tower, a gleaming spire of steel and glass that dominated the city skyline. She had spent her life seeing that building from the outside, a symbol of a world so far removed from her own, it might as well have been on another planet. And in a few hours she was expected to walk through its front doors. Panic set in a cold wave that followed the initial shock. What would she wear? Her entire wardrobe consisted of worn-out jeans, faded T-shirts, and the single, slightly too tight black blazer she'd bought for a college presentation 5 years ago. What would she say? Her knowledge of the Dutch masters felt theoretical, academic, and hopelessly inadequate in the face of the real-world prestige of the Blackwood Foundation. This had to be a mistake. Or worse, a prank. Or maybe it was some form of charity, a rich man's whim born out of pity for the poor waitress he'd seen get humiliated. The thought soured the hope that had begun to blossom in her chest. She didn't want pity. She had spent her entire life fighting against being an object of pity. She spent the next few hours in a frantic state of preparation. She ironed her old blazer until it was impossibly crisp, paired it with her only pair of black trousers, and pulled her simple brown hair into a severe professional bun. She looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror of her tiny apartment bathroom. The woman staring back looked terrified, an imposter about to play a role she hadn't rehearsed. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed the worn leather satchel that held her college thesis, a 200-page analysis of Vermeer's use of light and its influence on provenance verification. It was her armor. If this was a real opportunity, it was all she had to prove her worth. The lobby of the Blackwood Tower was designed to intimidate. The ceiling soared 3 stories high. The floors were polished black marble that reflected the light like a dark mirror, and a massive abstract sculpture dominated the center of the space. It felt less like an office building and more like a cathedral dedicated to commerce. Kate approached the monolithic security desk, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "I'm here to see Genevieve Croft," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The security guard checked his list, gave her a visitor's pass, and directed her to a private elevator bank. The ride to the 50th floor was silent and swift, her ears popping as the car ascended. When the doors slid open, she stepped into another world. This wasn't an office, it was a gallery. The walls were lined with museum-quality art, a calm, contemplative Rothko here, a striking, aggressive Pollock there. Genevieve Croft was exactly as her voice had suggested, impeccably dressed, elegantly coiffed, and radiating an aura of formidable competence. She led Kate through a hushed, open-plan office where people in tailored suits spoke in low, serious tones, and into a large corner office. The office had one wall made entirely of glass, offering a breathtaking god-like view of the city below, and sitting behind a large minimalist desk was Damien Blackwood. Today he was not the quietly dressed patron from Aurelia. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and no tie. The casual observer from the restaurant was gone, replaced by the man whose face she'd seen in Forbes. Power radiated from him, but it was a quiet, contained power, not the boorish, showy kind that Bradley Vance projected. "Miss Pierce." "Thank you for coming," he said, rising from his desk. He gestured to a chair opposite him. "Please have a seat." Kate sat perching on the edge of the plush leather chair. Her satchel felt heavy and foolish on her lap. "I hope my offer last night didn't seem too forward." He began, his eyes watching her closely. "It was unexpected," Kate admitted. "I don't operate on whims, Miss Pierce," he said, as if reading her mind. "Last night I saw two things. I saw a person subjected to unwarranted cruelty, and I saw that person respond with a level of poise that I rarely encounter. But that's not why you're here. You're here because you mentioned you studied the provenance of art looted during the Second World War." He leaned forward, his focus entirely on her. "My foundation is currently tracking a piece, a small, relatively unknown painting by Johannes Vermeer, titled The Girl with the Silver Lute. It was stolen from a private collection in The Hague in 1943. We have reason to believe it has recently surfaced on the black market, and that a buyer in this city is attempting to acquire it. The work is subtle. Its authenticity is difficult to verify without expert knowledge." "Tell me about Vermeer. What would you look for?" This was it. The test. All the self-doubt, all the fear evaporated, replaced by the familiar thrill of academic passion. Kate's posture straightened. She opened her mouth, and the knowledge she had spent years acquiring poured out. She spoke about Vermeer's use of expensive pigments like ultramarine and lead tin yellow. She discussed his signature technique of applying paint in small luminous dots, a precursor to pointillism. She detailed his unique handling of light, particularly light filtering through a leaded glass window on the left-hand side of the composition, a feature present in a majority of his surviving works. She even referenced her own thesis, explaining how microscopic analysis of the craquelure, the pattern of fine cracks on the surface of the paint, could help distinguish a 17th-century masterpiece from a modern forgery. She spoke for 10 minutes, uninterrupted. Damien listened, his expressions unreadable, his gaze never leaving her face. When she finished a little breathless, the office was silent. Damien leaned back in his chair. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his severe features into something warm and genuinely impressed. "Miss Pierce," he said, his voice laced with new respect. "That was more insightful than the analysis given to me by the head of my department, a man with 30 years of experience." He picked up a file from his desk and slid it across to her. "This is the file on The Girl with the Silver Lute. The position of junior research associate is yours if you want it. It comes with a full salary benefits and a research budget. Your first assignment will be to work with our team to authenticate and recover that painting. Your primary qualification for this job is not my sympathy. It is your mind." "Do you want it?" Tears pricked at the back of Kate's eyes, but she blinked them away. These were not tears of humiliation or despair, but of overwhelming, unbelievable gratitude. The pity she had feared was nowhere to be found. In its place was genuine opportunity, an offer extended not as a handout, but as a recognition of her skill. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. I want it more than anything." She walked out of the Blackwood Tower an hour later, not as Catherine Pierce, the fired waitress, but as Catherine Pierce Jr. Research Associate. The city spread out before her, no longer a landscape of struggle and survival, but a horizon of infinite possibility. While Kate's world was expanding, Tiffany Sterling's was beginning to shrink. Her life with Bradley Vance was a gilded cage, beautiful from the outside, but cold and confining within. Her days were a meticulously scheduled rotation of high-end spin classes, lunches with other women whose surnames were their primary identity, and endless shopping trips to maintain the facade of effortless perfection. The incident at Aurelia had in Tiffany's mind been a triumph. She had asserted her dominance, put a lowly servant in her place, and reminded Brad of the high-maintenance prize he was lucky to have. She had regaled her friends with the story over champagne, embellishing Kate's clumsiness and her own righteous indignation. They had laughed along with her, their tinkling laughter a chorus of shared privilege. But the victory felt hollow. Brad had been strangely quiet on the drive home that night. While he had paid for a replacement dress without complaint, he had also made a passing comment that had lodged under her skin like a splinter. "You know, Tiff," he'd said, his eyes on the road, "sometimes you can be a little... much." "Much," she had scoffed. "I was defending my honor. That girl was a disaster. She was a waitress who made a mistake," he'd replied, his tone weary. "The scene you made was embarrassing." The word embarrassing had stung more than any insult. It implied that she, not the waitress, had been the one to commit a social faux pas. The thought was galling. For Tiffany, her entire existence was predicated on never being embarrassing. In the weeks that followed, she noticed a subtle shift in Brad. He was more distant, his eyes glued to his phone during their lavish dinners. He started making excuses to cancel their plans, citing late-night meetings and early-morning conference calls. Tiffany knew the rhythm of his business dealings. This sudden surge in work felt fabricated. Her insecurity, a hungry creature she normally kept, sedated with luxury purchases and public displays of affection, began to stir. Her power was entirely derived from Brad. She wasn't a Sterling by birth. She was a girl from a middle-class suburb who had clawed her way into this world through sheer will and careful self-reinvention. Brad was not just her boyfriend. He was her sponsor, her validation, her brand. Without him, the gilded cage would disappear, and she'd be left with nothing. She tried to tighten her grip. She planned a surprise weekend trip to Aspen, only for him to claim a critical deal was closing. She bought tickets to a charity ball she knew he wanted to attend, but he sent his junior associate in his place. Each rejection was a small crack in the foundation of her carefully constructed life. One evening, desperate to reignite the spark, she put on a new dress, a daring, backless Tom Ford number, and surprised him at his office. She breezed past his secretary with a confident smile, intending to seduce him away from his paperwork. She found him not hunched over spreadsheets, but laughing on the phone, his voice relaxed and intimate in a way she hadn't heard in months. He saw her and his face froze. He quickly ended the call. "Tiff, what are you doing here?" There was no pleasure in his voice, only annoyance. "I came to surprise my hard-working boyfriend," she said, forcing a playful pout. "I'm busy," he said flatly, not even looking at her dress. "You should have called." "Who were you talking to?" She asked the question sharp and jealous. A client, he lied, but his eyes darted away. It was in that moment that Tiffany knew. There was someone else. She didn't know who, but the signs were unmistakable. The distance, the excuses, the secret phone calls. The gilded cage had become a prison, and she was suddenly terrified that the door was about to be opened, and she would be unceremoniously thrown out. Her world, once a glamorous whirlwind of parties and privilege, became a landscape of suspicion. She started checking his phone when he was in the shower, scrutinizing his credit card statements, analyzing every interaction he had with another woman. The confident, queenly woman who had terrorized a waitress at Aurelia was gone, replaced by a paranoid, frightened shell. Her friends noticed the change. Her laughter was brittle, her conversation always circling back to Brad. She became obsessed with appearances, posting endless photos of them on social media, with captions full of saccharine declarations of love, as if she could convince the world and perhaps herself that nothing was wrong. One afternoon, while scrolling through a local society blog, a picture caught her eye. It was from the opening of a new exhibit at the city's Contemporary Art Museum. A group of the city's elite were pictured, and standing slightly to the side, deep in conversation with the museum's director, was Damien Blackwood. Tiffany's breath caught. Blackwood was the ultimate prize, a man so wealthy and powerful he made Brad look like a small-town mayor. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed. And standing next to him, looking poised and intelligent in a simple but elegant navy blue dress, was a woman with familiar brown hair pulled back from her face. Tiffany zoomed in, her heart turning to ice. It couldn't be, but it was. It was the waitress, Catherine, the clumsy, plain girl from the restaurant. But she looked different. There was a confidence in her posture, a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The caption identified her Damien Blackwood and Catherine Pierce, a research associate from the Blackwood Foundation, whose team was instrumental in the exhibit's curation. Rage pure and undiluted surged through Tiffany. It was followed by a wave of disbelief and a profound sense of cosmic injustice. How was this possible? How could that nobody that stain on the fabric of her evening be standing next to Damien Blackwood? It made no sense. The world had been turned upside down. The natural order of things, of the beautiful and wealthy succeeding, while the plain and poor served them, had been violated. She stared at the picture, at Kate's serene, intelligent face, and then at her own reflection in the dark screen of her phone. For the first time, Tiffany Sterling didn't see a beautiful, powerful woman. She saw the fear in her own eyes, and she realized the waitress she had tried to destroy had somehow impossibly ended up with everything. The first few weeks at the Blackwood Foundation were a whirlwind for Kate. She was given a small Spartan office with a window that looked out not onto the sweeping cityscape, but onto the brick wall of the adjacent building. It didn't matter. To Kate, it was a palace. It was a space that was hers, a place where her value was determined by the content of her mind, not the speed with which she could clear a table. The work was everything she had ever dreamed of and more. She was immersed in a world of dusty archives, high-resolution digital imagery, and scholarly texts. The case of Vermeer's The Girl with the Silver Lute was a complex, fascinating puzzle. She spent her days tracing the painting's fragmented history, cross-referencing auction records with seized Nazi inventories and the private letters of collectors. Her colleagues were initially wary of her. They were seasoned academics and art historians from Ivy League schools, and they knew she had been hired directly by Blackwood himself under unusual circumstances. They were polite but distant, watching her with scrutinizing eyes. Kate knew she had to prove herself. She worked tirelessly, arriving early and staying late. She didn't just do what was asked of her. She did more. She found a forgotten footnote in a wartime diary that provided a new lead, a crucial link in the chain of the painting's ownership. She presented her findings at a team, meeting her voice nervous, but her arguments clear and well-researched. The head of the department, the man Damien had mentioned, raised a skeptical eyebrow at first, but as she laid out her evidence, his expression shifted to one of grudging respect. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. Damien remained a distant, almost mythical figure. He was rarely on the 50th floor, spending most of his time in his executive suite on the 60th, or flying to one of his company's international offices, but he was clearly keeping track of her progress. Occasionally an email would arrive from him at an odd hour, 2 a.m., 5 a.m., with a single incisive question about her research or a link to an obscure article he thought she might find useful. Each one was a reminder that he was watching, that he was invested in her success. Their relationship remained strictly professional, but a current of something else ran beneath the surface. One evening, Kate was working late, the only person left in the department, when he appeared in the doorway of her office. He had shed his suit jacket, and his sleeves were rolled up to his forearms. He looked tired. "Burning the midnight oil?" "Miss Pierce?" he asked, his voice softer than she was used to. "The trail for the Vermeer gets cold after 1948, she said, gesturing to the mountain of papers on her desk. "I'm trying to find where it went." He walked into the office, his presence seeming to fill the small space. He leaned over her desk, looking at a map she had pinned to a corkboard covered in strings and notes. His scent, a subtle mix of expensive cologne and clean laundry, was distracting. "You're looking in the wrong place," he said, his finger tracing a line from Germany to South America. Many of the high-ranking officials who fled after the war established new lives in Argentina. They took their stolen treasures with them. "Look for shipping manifests into Buenos Aires between 1948 and 1952. It was a lead no one else had considered. It was brilliant. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," she said, looking up at him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the space between them felt charged with an unspoken energy. He wasn't just her boss. He was the man who had seen her at her lowest, and had, for reasons she still didn't fully understand, decided to lift her up. "Call me Damien," he said quietly, "and I should be thanking you, Kate. Your work has been exceptional." He called her Kate. The shift from the formal Miss Pierce was not lost on her. His lead proved fruitful. Within 2 weeks, they had traced the painting to a private vault in Geneva, owned by the estate of a former Argentine industrialist with a shadowy past. The process of repatriation was delicate and would take months of legal maneuvering, but they had found it. Kate had been the key. To celebrate, Damien invited the entire team to dinner, not at a stuffy formal place like Aurelia, but a small, authentic Italian restaurant in a quiet neighborhood. The atmosphere was relaxed and jovial. Kate, for the first time, felt like a true member of the team. Her colleagues clapped her on the back and praised her work, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine camaraderie. At the end of the night, Damien offered to drive her home. In the quiet intimacy of his car, a sleek, understated Bentley, the professional barrier between them seemed to dissolve completely. "I have a confession to make," he said, his eyes on the road. "The night I met you, I wasn't at Aurelia for the scallops." Kate turned to look at his profile in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. "Oh, my grandfather was an artist," he continued. "A painter. Not famous, but talented. He was Jewish. He and my grandmother fled Amsterdam in 1941. They were forced to leave everything behind, including all of his paintings. He never painted again. He died believing his life's work was lost forever." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "For the last 10 years, I have been using my foundation's resources to find his work. We've recovered 12 pieces so far. The work we do, it's not just an academic exercise for me. It's personal. That's why your passion for it resonated with me." Kate was speechless. Suddenly everything made sense. His presence at the restaurant, his pointed questions, his investment in her success. It was all connected to a deep personal mission. "Damien," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be," he said, pulling up in front of her modest apartment building. Be the person who helps get these things back to the people they belong to. You are already doing that." He turned to face her, his dark eyes searching hers. "Kate, I know this is unorthodox, but I was wondering if you would be willing to have dinner with me this Saturday. Not as my employee, but just as you." Her heart leapt. This was the moment everything changed again. The metamorphosis from waitress to researcher had been about her mind. This was about her heart. "I'd like that very much," she said, a real unguarded smile spreading across her face. As she got out of the car and watched the Bentley pull away, Kate knew her life had been irrevocably altered. She had shed the skin of the invisible girl. She was stepping into the light not as someone's charity case, but as a woman who was valued for her intellect, her passion, and her character. And she was about to have dinner with the man who had seen it all along. The Blackwood Foundation's annual charity gala was the undisputed crown jewel of the city's social calendar. It was an event where old money mingled with new, where titans of industry clinked glasses with celebrated artists, and where fortunes were pledged to philanthropic causes. This year the gala was being held at the Grand Astoria Hotel, and its centerpiece was the official unveiling of the recovered Vermeer, the girl with the silver lute. For Kate, attending the gala felt like the final scene of a play in which she had been inexplicably cast as the lead. 6 months ago, she had been serving canapés at events like this. Tonight, she was arriving on the arm of Damien Blackwood. Her transformation was complete. Damien had insisted on buying her a gown, waving away her protests with a simple, "You are representing the foundation." And me. The dress was a masterpiece of deep emerald silk that shimmered under the light, its elegant cut highlighting a newfound confidence in her posture. Her hair was swept up in a graceful chignon, and a simple diamond necklace, a gift from Damien, who had told her it belonged to his grandmother, rested at her collarbone. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger she was finally beginning to recognize as herself. The weariness was gone from her eyes, replaced by a bright, clear-eyed intelligence. The timid waitress was a ghost of the past. In her place stood a poised, accomplished woman. Their arrival at the gala caused a stir. The paparazzi, who usually reserved their frenzy for movie stars and royalty, erupted in a flash of cameras as Damien's Bentley pulled up. He was notoriously private, and his appearance with a beautiful unknown woman on his arm was a major scoop. He guided Kate through the storm, his hand resting securely in the small of her back, his presence a calm, protective shield. Inside the ballroom was a breathtaking spectacle of crystal chandeliers and cascading flowers. Damien was immediately surrounded by people vying for his attention, but he kept Kate close, introducing her not as his date, but as his partner. "This is Catherine Pierce," he would say, his voice filled with pride. Her brilliant research was the key to recovering the Vermeer. With every introduction, Kate's confidence grew. She spoke eloquently about the painting, her passion for the subject captivating senators and CEOs alike. She was no longer an accessory. She was a presence in her own right. They were standing near the bar when Kate saw them, Bradley Vance and Tiffany Sterling. They were holding court in a small circle, Tiffany's laugh as sharp and attention-grabbing as ever. She was wearing a garish feathered dress that screamed for attention. Tiffany saw her first. Her eyes widened in disbelief, her champagne flute freezing halfway to her lips. She nudged Brad, who followed her gaze. His jaw literally dropped. He stared at Kate as if he were seeing a ghost, a beautiful, impossibly elegant ghost. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down. Kate's heart gave a single, hard thud. This was the moment she had subconsciously dreaded and perhaps craved. The final confrontation. Tiffany, recovering her composure, plastered a venomous smile on her face and began to walk towards them, dragging Brad behind her. "Well, well," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine condescension. "Look what the cat dragged in. I didn't realize they were letting the help attend this year." She looked Kate up and down her eyes, lingering on the dress. "That's a lovely rental, dear." "You clean up surprisingly well." Brad looked mortified. "Tiff don't." But Tiffany was on a roll, fueled by jealousy and the shock of seeing her former victim so spectacularly elevated. "So who are you here with? Did you manage to snag a lonely old widower to be your sugar daddy for the evening?" Before Kate could respond, Damien stepped slightly in front of her, his movement subtle but definitive. He looked down at Tiffany from his considerable height, his expression one of pure glacial contempt. "Ms. Sterling." I believe he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut through the surrounding chatter. "I am Damien Blackwood, and this is my fiancée, Catherine Pierce." The word fiancée dropped into the conversation like a bomb. Tiffany's face went slack with shock. Her perfectly painted jaw hung open. She stared from Damien to Kate, her mind refusing to compute the reality of the situation. Fiancé to the Damien Blackwood. It was impossible. Brad's face paled. He looked at Kate, truly looked at her, and saw not the clumsy waitress he'd allowed his girlfriend to abuse, but a woman of elegance, intelligence, and power. A woman who was now completely, utterly out of his league. The magnitude of his mistake hit him with the force of a physical blow. Fiancée Tiffany finally choked out her voice, a strangled whisper. "You're lying." Damien raised an eyebrow. "I assure you I have no reason to lie. Kate is the most brilliant, compassionate, and dignified woman I have ever met. Whereas you—" He let his gaze sweep over her in a deliberately dismissive appraisal. "You are merely the loudest person in the room. There is a difference." The insult was surgical, devastating. It struck at the very heart of Tiffany's identity. She who had built her entire world on being seen and admired had just been dismissed as nothing more than noise. Then Brad did something that sealed their fate. He turned to Kate, his eyes wide with a desperate, pathetic plea. "Kate. Catherine. I am so sorry about that night. Tiffany, she wasn't herself. You look incredible. We should talk sometime." It was a clumsy, transparent attempt to hedge his bets, to crawl back into the orbit of power. Kate looked at him, and she felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a profound sense of pity. He was as hollow as the woman standing next to him. She gave him a small, cool smile. "I don't think we have anything to talk about, Bradley," she said, her voice calm and steady. "You and I exist in very different worlds." With that, she turned her back on them. Damien placed his hand on hers, his touch warm and reassuring. Together they walked away, leaving Tiffany and Brad standing in the middle of the ballroom, utterly humiliated. The circle of listeners that had surrounded them had melted away, eager to distance themselves from the social wreckage. Tiffany's face was a mask of fury and shame, her gilded world shattered by the woman she had tried so hard to break. Kate didn't look back. Her past was behind her, and her future was waiting. The news of Damien Blackwood's engagement to a previously unknown art historian became the city's favorite fairy tale. But for Kate, it was never about the status. In the quiet of their penthouse, overlooking the glittering city, their relationship was defined not as a rescue, but as a partnership. "You didn't rescue me, Damien," she told him. "You empowered me." He had sought an equal partner whose strength of character could match his, and he had found her. A final echo from her past arrived via messenger, a letter from Bradley Vance. It contained a check large enough to solve all her old problems and a remorseful note explaining he had left Tiffany, whose cruelty had become too much to bear. Looking at the check, Kate felt no temptation, only closure. She promptly donated the entire sum to a legal aid fund for wrongfully dismissed service workers. She read later that Tiffany had faded into social obscurity, a quiet testament to the fact that her gilded world had been hollow all along. Kate's future was a canvas of her own creation. After being promoted to head the Arts and Antiquities department, her ultimate triumph was realized a year later. She stood with Damien in the newly opened Pierce Blackwood wing of the City Museum, dedicated to repatriated art. In the center of the gallery, illuminated by a soft light, was The Girl with the Silver Lute. As they watched school children gather around it, Damien wrapped his arms around her waist. "Look what you built," he whispered. Kate smiled a deep, genuine smile of contentment. She had once been an invisible girl defined by a stain, but she had become a woman who curated not only art, but her own destiny. A person's true worth is never defined by their job, their uniform, or the price tag on their clothes. It's measured in their character, their resilience, and the quiet dignity they maintain when the world is at its cruelest. Catherine's story is a powerful reminder that the person you look down on today might be the one you're looking up to tomorrow. Life has a funny way of rewarding integrity and exposing the hollow nature of pride and arrogance. Her journey from a humiliated waitress to a celebrated philanthropist and beloved fiancé wasn't a stroke of luck. It was the result of a powerful man recognizing the true value that others were too blind to see. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of character over circumstance, please take a moment to hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire challenge and remind us of the incredible twists and turns of real life. Thank you for listening.